Welcome back to HeightsCast, the podcast of the Heights School. This is Rich Moss with you from the campus of the Heights in Potomac, Maryland. We're here to talk about the education and the formation of young men fully alive in the liberal arts tradition. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for continuing to share us, our mission, and our vision of education with your friends. We're very, very grateful. Today, I'm delighted to welcome to the HeightsCast studio Mr. Colin Gleason, head of the Heights Lower School, head coach of the varsity soccer team, and teacher of moral theology in the Heights Upper School. Welcome, Colin.
Thanks for having me.
And today we are going to talk about listening to our sons. And I think this conversation, like so many others, that probably came up organically at some point. And here we're just going to chase it down a little bit more. But it is an interesting topic for us because I think as hard-charging Washingtonians, who, sometimes we do a good job, sometimes we don't do a great job. But at the end of the day, we love our kids, we love our sons, and so we want to achieve this what we perceive to be success in their life. We want them to be successful, and sometimes I think that leads us to be perhaps a bit chattier than we ought to be. And so today's conversation is going to be about flipping the table, so to speak, and fostering an environment where we can listen to our sons. Our sons believe that they can be heard, and in that moment, there's some really beautiful growth that can happen. So grateful to you for bringing this topic to us, and let's begin. I'm going to stop talking and start listening. So listening, what made you think of this? What brought it up, and why do you think it's important for us as parents?
Yeah. Man, I love this podcast because, most podcasts you get like 15 minutes of how the weather and like how we've been doing, just not Rich Moss. Just
right for the jugular.
Right for the jugular. No warm-ups.
Washingtonian.
Love it. It's kind of come about through my last 10 years or so of being head of the lower school and trying my best to guide teachers in what we do. And you've really already said the most important thing, which is that we get stuck talking so much. And that was number one, I think, the thing that I would write down on my observations when I would observe teachers. And then started hearing it in myself, both as a parent and as a teacher, that we over-teach. We over-talk. And so I've just seen that come back and back. When we think of parenting, when we think of teaching, it just strikes us as a very active thing. We have this truth in our minds that we want to deliver, and you, pupil, or you, son, don't have it. So here you go. And that's sort of just, the very basic presumption that we bring to the job unless we get a little bit more thoughtful and realize that instead of before us in the classroom or in the home with our children are just these things to be filled up with our knowledge, that there are, when we look at our son, it's this wonder, it's this mystery that when we teach someone, we're not just filling up, we're not just delivering, that we're engaging with the mysterious, beautiful, who knows what. Like, it's almost, words aren't enough to encompass what is this creature in front of us. That this creature has the divine spark within him. And I mean, if you just think about that, and obviously here we're aided by our Christian faith when we think about each person being made in the image and likeness of God, and with all the individuals and human beings that have been created throughout history, not one single one being alike, right? Being the same. That's such a common thing to think about, but it's mind-blowing as well. And I think maybe the first step and maybe the most important of this whole conversation is just coming to that acknowledgement for ourselves as teachers, as parents, when we step into that zone of trying to teach and trying to parent, just standing in awe of the child in front of us, and that there's just this beautiful mystery, and it's not simply molding, it's not just simply filling up, but it's engaging in this awesome back and forth, give and take, sharing of not just information, but truth and beauty and goodness. I think that really is the starting point. And if you think about the word education, like from its roots, we are drawing out. It's not a word that means filling up. We're drawing them out. And towards what, right? I mean, sometimes it's just a drawing them out of themselves. You know, who is this person that God has made? It's clearly not this that we're looking at right now in its fullness. Like there's something in there. And I think that might be a good distinction for us to make too. That, you know, we often get stuck in directing and saying, you do this, and then he's a good kid if he does it. Mm-hmm. But that level remains pretty superficial. That's only operating on the surface and on the externals. We see what they do, but we have no idea what's going on inside of them. Yeah. And in order to witness and to bring about, to lead out, to engage with what's going on inside of them, we have to hear. We need to listen, and I think that's a big part of where the art of teaching, the art of parenting comes in. We all as human beings, whether we're 4 or 40, have this desire to be seen, to be acknowledged. And, when someone says, I see you, or communicates, I see you, that's awesome. And that's on sort of the physical level. It's acknowledging this physical presence and this physical reality. When I say, I hear you, that is an acknowledgement of not only what I see on the surface, but actually now there's some knowledge of what's going on inside, and an interest to know that. And so it's really the beginning. That's why, teaching, it's relationship. Parenting, it's relational. It can't be just, from one to the other. It's this engagement in the interior life.
That's awesome. There's so much to think about there, because it seems like when we overteach, which is so easy to do, pardon me, especially in this day and age where we're not in Kentucky, we're not in. I always think of Port William and Wendell Berry's series, where the kids wake up and they head outdoors. I mean, in this day and age, they're kind of under our supervision for so much of their life. So you think about a lot of kids, you wake up in the morning and we're all there, and you're in the carpool together, and you're all there. You get home at the end of the day and you do your homework, and you're at the dinner table and you're all there together. There's not as much, natural freedom. And so there's so many opportunities then as a very well-intentioned parent to bestow our wisdom on the next generation. And so it's something to be careful of, like, okay, in the car, how often am I just like downloading? Yeah. Tom Royals had a great line in one of our conversations. He said something to the effect of that his wonderful wife encouraged him on Sundays not to correct table manners, which is an interesting one. And that's not for everybody, right? We all have to kind of come up with our own approach, but I've tried it a couple of times, and it's hard to just like bite your tongue and just sit there and behold.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that's so key, is the freedom aspect of letting our children just be sometimes. Yeah. And that's different from just like let them do whatever they want, right? Because that's obviously not what we're going to be encouraging.
Right.
But this whole conversation has to happen under that context of freedom. Yeah. That, we want them to be, there's a specific person that God intends our son to be, to become. And he's not that yet. Right. But there's elements of that in him, and to draw it out. That the constriction, even just the constricted feeling of constantly being under supervision.
Yeah.
Constantly acting. I mean, we can get into this mode into our adulthood where we are simply acting purely based off of others' expectations.
Yeah.
And expectations, those can be good, by the way. But it can develop, if that's purely what is guiding our actions, that's not healthy.
Right.
That's what leads to doing everything based off of what, it's going to look like on social media, or, I mean, think about how much that throws off someone struggling in the self-consciousness of adolescence.
Oh, man.
Right? And you think about one of our major modern dilemmas in our culture of this like identity crisis.
Yeah.
And, maybe we tend to kind of jump on it right away and think of it as this big political question, but maybe it's more interpersonal, where, these individuals, if they had been heard a little bit more, if they had someone who was lovingly and patiently, listening to them to draw out their true self, rather than sort of a kind of a shadow walking under the force of others' expectations, to the point where then they need to explode out of that into something that's totally other. Right. Well, when they do that, they don't really find their true selves either.
Right.
But, and by the way, this whole, this is really difficult.
It's so hard.
I mean, I hope that everyone understands. Like, I'm so excited about doing this because I want to get better at it. I'm terrible at it. Totally. And
Ditto.
And as a parent and as an educator, it's just such a difficult thing to do. And so, being conscientious about it, day in, day out, is probably the most important thing.
Yeah. So this is a great service in that regard, because now we at least, we might not be good at it, but at least we know we should be thinking about it.
Right.
And it's interesting. I love the idea of education as kind of this leading of the person into the fullness of who God created them to be. That's so much more than just some bullet points. I mean, obviously the knowledge is important, but it seems like it's more of like engineering or fostering an encounter between the individual and the individual's heart and the truth. And that encounter is a place where the person becomes person, rather than, but I think it's so easy as a parent, especially, to just think like, I just need to download into you what you need to know. And that's going to be enough.
Does he have his timetables? Does he write in cursive? Can he spell well? Can he do this? And it gets to be this list of like technical ability, which obviously, again, those are tools that are necessary and important. We're not discounting those altogether, but it becomes, we get distracted by thinking that is the sum total of the person's worth. Yeah. And then their worth becomes based off of, their self-worth becomes based off of their product rather than their being, like who they are and who they were meant to be.
And it gets complicated because then as a parent, it's not just the multiplication. It also becomes things like, okay, is he, how many days a week is he going to mass? So there are really concrete, objectively good things that you want to see, and you want to download into the child the things that you want to see. But I think you're encouraging us to kind of take a different approach to this. Or at least to take an approach to this that encompasses more listening, in hopes of then doing a better job of introducing this heart to the reality that heart is supposed to embrace.
Yeah. Because even someone who's like really good at all those things, straight A's, does his chores at home, really obedient right away, man, those sons of ours might need it even more for it to be drawn out, because we can't know what's going on inside another person unless we engage in genuine, true conversation and listening to what's coming out of them. And it needs to be genuine.
So great. I want to go there.
Me too.
Please lead me. How do we do this?
Well,
how do we listen?
Yeah. I mean, look, I approach this with fear and trembling because, again, I think the most important thing is that it's on our minds as parents or as teachers. If it's on our minds as sort of a resolution to think of and to attempt, then our personal prudence will inform and allow us, in our own words, because we are, each of us as teachers, our own personal and completely unique beings, right? We have to do it in a separate way. So there's no canned formula, for teaching, for parenting, and we should have that sort of skepticism, I think, whenever we read teaching or parenting self-help book. But maybe some principles and just some things to kind of think about and have in our minds. I kind of think of, as I've thought about this over the years, kind of breaking it down so that we can be prepared going into these conversations, and so that we're not just thinking on the spot what's the best way to respond every time. It's kind of two categories, right, that we are engaging with our children. One, when they're coming to us with something, and second, when we are trying to get something out of them, and especially in terms of listening to them to hear what they have to say. So to kind of put it pithily, recon and response, right? Recon, when we're doing the digging and we're trying to draw out of them what they have, and either they are, quiet or something's going on. Response, when they bring it to us, when they're either a tantrum of some kind or just a simple question, whatever it might be. So those are sort of the two sort of opening categories we can break it into. So start with recon, which might be a little bit on the easier side. Again, I'm going to break it down and categorize each of those into the intellectual and emotional sort of categories, subcategories. Right? When they bring, when we're doing recon and we're trying to get out of them something as simple as, how was your day? What did you do at school today? This is the sort of the intellectual recon that we are doing from them. And, we can have loud kids that always bring stuff to us, and we can have quieter kids that just, it's like pulling teeth to get anything, what happened at school or anything. And I think, as sort of just a first shot off the bow, just to think about avoiding the extremes. Avoid the extremes of being, on the one hand, overly anxious, and on the other, sort of inattentive. I think, and again, these are, I am coming to all these points of what not to do because I have done all of them. And, over anxious when we are just, shooting them with questions, like you mentioned in your intro. Just, you get in the car and you're getting machine gunned with questions and interrogations from mom or dad about what happened at school. And the other is when we kind of ask the question, but we're clearly not in it, right? And we're looking at our phone and we're asking the question at the same time, and the kid's right not to actually give us a full, genuine answer because our attention's not fully turned to him. So that's something. I mean, again, especially with boys, the ride home or what happened at school today, or hey, what are you thinking right now? I remember my mom used to ask me, penny for your thoughts on the way home. I'm like, Mom, that's about what it's worth because I have nothing. Like, I'm literally thinking about nothing right now. I'm looking out the window. And I think Alvaro talks about the nothing box, right? Yep. Like, we go there often to the nothing box, and there's just nothing there. And our parents sometimes don't believe us, but that's true. Yeah. What do we do? I mean, I think sometimes to not just peg with questions, but maybe you share something. Right? I mean, listening is not just sitting there, but sometimes it's engaging in conversation. So you maybe share something from your day, and see if that stirs the pot a little bit and gets them thinking about, oh yeah, that reminds me of something that I did with Billy. And, it also communicates to them that you're actually interested. You're interested in the boy, right? In what's going on. And I think that's an important thing too, to communicate, is that we're interested in the soul and just like being there with him, rather than just tell me about the actions, right? And I'm not so concerned about the actions, but like I like being here and talking with you, and that might bring up something. And then there's the emotional side, when he's being quiet and we want to get something out of him. So this is still sort of in the recon category, but it's not just ride home from school and normal days looking out the window, or he's one of our quieter kids, but this is something's off. Like we can tell something's up, and we want to go, help him, right?
Yeah.
And I think we dads, we men have an especially hard time with this. We're just trying to solve the problem. Like I identify problem. My child is not acting the way that they usually act. Something is up, but they haven't communicated to me. I'm going to go in and I'm going to solve this.
Yep. I'm going to buy what it takes to fix it at Home Depot. Yeah. $9.99, and we'll be on our way.
Exactly. And I think kids smell that out, and they're not. A teacher needs to learn when they go into a classroom that the students are not in a receptive mode. It's the teacher's job to put them into receptivity. A parent has to recognize that with a child, that the child, especially in this zone, whatever's going on inside of him, is not ready to share. He's not ready to share. So you need to go in, I think, with that expectation that it's not simply just like popping up in the lid and seeing what's in there. And I think here to recognize that when we go into the room, or, we're driving home in the car, to know going in that this is not going to be the final conversation. It might not even be a conversation, but to make a communication that you're interested, that you care, and that you're there. So again, this is kind of getting to the unanxious side of things. So just you make the show of unanxious interest. Something like, hey, pal, I see that something's going wrong. I can tell that, you're not yourself right now. Just want to let you know, I'm all ears if you want to share, if you want to chat it out, come, knock on my door or whatever. And that avoids the almost automatic conflict of, hey, tell me what's going on. I can see that something's not right. What's wrong? And we can even do this really lovingly. Come on, tell me what's going on. I can see you're not doing nothing. Come on, tell me. Just making them more and more uncomfortable.
Yeah,
they're not in a place ready to share. And especially as they get a little bit older into the adolescence and the teenage years, the holding on to the ego, the holding on to self gets that much firmer, and it will not be extracted. It needs to be willingly shared from them. And so just to recognize that going in and know that, time is our currency. We're gonna need to be around and just wait for that time. It might be when we're finally done with our day's work, we've sat down in front of the fire with the book that we've been waiting to read all day.
Yeah,
and
likely.
then he comes down.
That's right.
Right.
Likely.
Or with the younger kids, often it's you finish nighttime prayers, you've done the bedtime story, you've done everything, and you are literally giving them a kiss and ready to walk out of that door, and it's, Dad, can I tell you something?
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. And so, to kind of be on our toes to be ready for that it's, we are not usually going to select the time and place for that conversation, but to hope for it and to communicate that we're open to it.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, you're creating an environment, a relationship of openness. And I just think of that amazing scene from Good Will Hunting where you've got Robin Williams and Matt Damon kind of battle of the wills. And I just remember, they sit by the river and Robin Williams says what he says, and he kind of looks at him. He says, "Well, it's your move, Chief."
Your move, Chief. I did not think about it, but that's exactly right. That's an awesome scene. Yeah.
So obviously, probably not going to be as combative, hopefully, in our homes, but like it right. is, like Robin Williams could just do the download on Damon, but it is a creation of a place, a safe place where the boy can confide. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Recon, and then response.
Yeah. So then the response is, when they're bringing it to you, right? And this is not going to be every child, or again, some are quieter, some are more talkative. I've had quieter children of my own, and I'm blessed with a few, notably one, loud, talkative children. And again, sort of breaking these up into the intellectual and emotional categories. Sometimes they're just going to jibber jabber all day about what happened at school, and it might just be something they're interested in. Look, we can't be 100% on and attentive every second for these types of conversations. And again, this is where I'm going to appeal and in all humility to our just parental prudence, and know, like, we've got to at least have our radars up, our antennas up, to pick out when are these good moments to maybe latch onto. Because there's going to be a lot of fluff that, okay, whatever. It's, you were really excited about the fact that you had chicken nuggets for lunch today or something like that. But then there's others that are, really great questions or really great thoughts. I remember Dad here at the Heights saying one day that he overheard in the back the boys, questioning each other, wondering whether Chewbacca has a soul. I mean, that's an awesome conversation.
It's amazing.
On the way into school the other day, my 6-year-old said, "Dad, you know what? I noticed the difference between adults and kids. Adults do things, and kids just like to play."
Oh my gosh!
I was like, "Wow,
philosopher."
And what a great start that is, and that's different than I loved the chicken nuggets that we had for lunch, obviously, and I think the key here, in terms of responding, is, and again, I'm trying not to just stick to the negatives of what not to do, but sometimes that's easier for me to keep track of. Is whether it's a question or a thought, to not jump in with the answers too quickly. I think we teachers especially need to keep that in mind, that the goal is to keep the questions coming. Like, we want them to continue asking. And, student asks a question about this, I don't know, what do you think about that? As a kid, I hated that, but, it probably drives them crazy. But the goal is cultivating the wonder. Like, I remember being a kid and asking my parents, why does the moon follow the car? And I do not remember their answer, but I remember them saying or responding in some way that made me feel like, well, that was a really cool question.
Yeah.
Right. And that, keep asking questions like that was sort of the message that I got. And that's how we want to answer, instead of giving the exact, formulaic, sometimes true answer to a thing, right? Like, I don't know, maybe my dad did explain, relational distance or that sort of thing when he answered that question. I don't think so. I think it's important to just respond with, wow, like, whatever in your words amounts to wow. That's what our kids want to hear. Like, to keep them coming to us with those types of thoughts and questions. I mean, in the lower school, we're just trying to get them to fall in love with learning. That's just asking questions, like getting them to continue asking questions that they ponder, that they're asking other people, that they're looking for in the right places and books and that sort of thing. So I think that's the kind of the most important thing to keep in mind with the intellectual side of things. The emotional side of things, this is where things get probably the most difficult. When we are responding to the emotional communications of our children, right? In the young, it's tantrums. Sometimes in the old, it's tantrums. But when they bring things to us that has some emotional charge to it, how do we respond to that? Because, it's a little bit tricky, right? We don't know how to respond sometimes. And I think, again, trying to find this balance of knowing that if we're anxious about it or inattentive, then it's not going to go well. Because anxious, we're going to get emotional. Inattentive, they're going to tell we don't care, and it's going to end poorly. I think the starting point with the emotions is to recognize as parents and teachers that those emotions, like when our kids have emotions, that those are neither good nor bad. The emotions themselves are not good or bad. And often we will find ourselves responding to the emotion and correcting the emotion and getting upset at our children for the emotion, when it's really the action, like what are they doing to act on that emotion that is the important thing. So I think there's that kind of keeping that in mind, that when they have those outbursts, or sometimes they're greater or lesser, to just recognize, keep in our minds, all right, I want to guide his behavior, I want to guide his actions, I don't want to guide his feelings. So we, again, will often kind of make these missteps of telling him how he should be feeling. Well, you're not actually upset about that, that teacher's not, you shouldn't be mad at your teacher for that. That but so I think to just acknowledge, the emotions, acknowledge their feelings and what they are feeling. And honestly, that's like a huge part of it. Because 9 times out of 10, that's all they want. They just want to, again, be heard. And the emotions, they don't usually, I'm saying we, as human beings, like often don't know what to do with these emotions, and to just share with somebody and let them and see that they acknowledge us and acknowledge those emotions is a huge part of the battle. Other things to stay away from is, again, sort of interrogating them. Well, why do you feel like this? Why do you feel like that? 'Cause, again, they don't know. It's just going to frustrate them even more. Or jumping in to give advice right away, or saying like, I understand exactly what you're saying. Here's what I would do. That there might be a time for that, but it's probably not right away. And a lot of times, especially if the emotion is running high, you need to give a little bit more space. We need to give a little bit more space for that to just come out. And again, kind of getting back to your on the money point about freedom, we need to give the emotions some freedom there to just breathe. And again, becoming emotional ourselves, we definitely don't want to get into those sort of moments where we lock horns and that sort of thing. But to try to empathize, like I think I understand what you're getting from. Is this you are upset that your teacher gave a big test when he said it was going to be a small quiz? Are you upset because you weren't prepared for that? Or that it's kind of giving them some language, because especially our young boys, but I'd say even as they get older, have a really hard time putting language to their feelings. And so sometimes asking them, is this how you're feeling? Can be a good step in communicating to them that we care and we're trying to understand, and we probably are not nailing it right off the bat, but you help me, and is this what you're feeling? That can help them feel at ease a little bit. Sometimes just sitting there and letting them stew is the way to go. Like, just you might make a that I think so often, again, sort of getting back to this over teaching, over mentoring, over parenting, we don't have to solve everything. Not every moment is a life-altering crisis. And we might not know how much of that tantrum or that emotion that they're letting out is them drawing out of themselves, right? It's a genuine feeling that they're feeling, and so allow them the time and space with you being there to hear them and listen. We know this as we become adults and we have friends that, we confide in when something is really hard, and if that person, we know much better how to respond to our peers or a close friend who brings to us something really emotional. But I think if we do that same thing with our children, we'll have much better results. Finally, just sort of common sense things like, sometimes they just want to be held. Physical contact instead of words, like that is a language. And that can have a huge impact, not just on a toddler, but on a teenager. I think about it for the right moment. Obviously, it can't be every little thing, but for a dad to bring in a 17-year-old boy for a hug when he's having a hard time like that, you save that for the right moment, that can be huge. So again, none of these are sort of, I think, mind-blowing things. And I think if we have just the eye towards how can I listen better, then our own personal prudence on these things will guide us and inform us.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, and that'd be an awesome future conversation, perhaps, just on the whole topic of emotions, because it is interesting. In so many respects, it's like, the emotion it's a neutral. There's also a way in which you do want those emotions to be felt in certain circumstances. So you need those to be well trained. You need the emotions well trained, and you need the response to the emotions to be well trained.
Right.
And that only happens if they actually have the opportunity to express them and live them and process them. So it's a really good reminder. Let me throw a couple questions at you.
Please. And
feel free to take them as you will. But as we're responding, a couple of outliers come to mind. One would be, kind of role play here, but Dad, you're the worst. This dinner's terrible and everything's bad, and I don't know why we live here, and this is just... so it's kind of like this combination of disrespect and then a separate, related, sometimes, not always, would be the complaint. So how do you handle emotive disrespect? How do you handle complaint?
Yeah. No, that's good. I think that it's important to think about and read in the moment whether the emotions are genuine. Because we can, as human beings, we do possess the capacity to put on an emotion.
That's such a good question.
Right? We can affect emotions within us, or at least, at the very least, we can fan one that's just a little spark into a blazing fire completely unnecessarily. And so, with when I'm saying empathize with their emotions and show them that you care, and let them give them space for those feelings and those emotions, we need, again, to practice our prudence and identify, is this a sincere emotion? Or is there something that he wants that he is using this emotion blow up to try to get? And in that case, it's not being very sincere. And so, I think back at to the scriptures where Jesus is, forget what it was, the Pharisees or the Sadducees. They ask him a question, and he asked them a question back, and does John's baptism come from here or above? And they say, well, you hear their inner thoughts, and they say, well, we don't know, but their we don't know is insincere. And so he says, neither will I tell you. In other words, I'm not going to engage with you if you're not going to be sincere with me. And I think as parents, we can do that with our kids. If your emotion is insincere, I'm not going to engage with it. In other words, come back when you're ready to be genuine with me. And so often the complaints, the nonsense complaints are really, insincere. And so we can direct them to that. Go take some time. Think about, again, try to put your reason in charge of your emotions right now. Come back when you're ready to be a little bit more under control. There might be, like you asked, and it's a great question, and I hope I handle this right, but, their emotion might be genuine, but it goes overboard to the point where, they say something disrespectful or they say something that they shouldn't be saying. Well, getting back to, we want to guide their actions, not their feelings. I do think we need to address what they said because our words are actions. And so I think we can do one and the same at the same time. We can acknowledge their feelings and correct what they just said. So I understand that you feel really strongly about this. What you just said, I'm sure you don't mean, and it was wrong. So I do think that's part of their education. We can't just let them get away with whatever because they're feeling everything, right? I mean, that would be irresponsible. And I do think we have more leeway when they're younger because, they're going to abuse that, I think, more. And when they get older, I think in their adolescent years, to be maybe a little bit more respectful of their feelings. But again, that's going to be a total judgment call. I'm not encouraging that we just let them get away with wild outbursts, but to maybe draw that distinction in our own minds so that that comes out in our words, that we're not correcting how they're feeling. We're correcting how they communicated their feeling, and the way that they communicated that was completely inappropriate or whatever the situation calls for. Yeah,
no, that's super helpful. The old kind of, hey, count to 10. Put some space, and I like how you put it. I want to understand what you're feeling. I want to understand what you're experiencing, but what you said is not acceptable, and maybe you need some time to calm down, and then we can have this conversation. That's really helpful. And it's interesting because really what we're trying to teach in those moments, those intense moments, is how to respond. In a way, what we're trying to teach is how to respond to those feelings that you have, and it's such a catch-22 that sometimes we do the thing that we're trying to teach our kids not to do by responding to them in an impassioned and angry way.
Stop yelling.
Yeah, exactly. So then you go back to your room, you just hold your head and you say, oh my gosh, parenting's so hard.
Yeah.
I need to do a podcast with Colin.
No, I'm really hoping that nobody who in my family or anyone really who knows me well listens to this, because they'll be like, this is ridiculous.
Oh my gosh.
He's the one talking about this.
No. This is we're building the airplane as we fly it. But fortunately, we've got some really great manuals from people who've walked this walk and just done it beautifully. There's so much here to think about. I'm really grateful for this time and the thought. Any closing comments? I'm all ears, Colin.
I mean, I just kind of maybe just finishing where we started about how important this is, and that if you think about what we're preparing them for, what we're hoping that they will become, there's like no venue in their life that us doing a better job at this will not benefit them in, whether it's their professional lives or their relationships. But I almost think about this in a next level way of, what we're really preparing them for is, we're teaching them not just how to have a conversation. We're not just teaching them how to parent when they become parents. We're teaching them how to become themselves, how to pray, right? We're teaching them how to pray, because when they, we're teaching them how to be in heaven, right? Like if what, we're called to do is to be with our Maker and converse with him for eternity, which is going to be awesome, by the way, because it's going to be face to face, and now it's darkly through a mirror, and we're preparing our children to be able to sit in a pew and look up at that gold box and be able to have something that resembles a conversation. And, we teach them, we are teaching them vocal prayers, and we memorize, they're memorizing prayers, and that's great, and have to do that. That's how to speak the prayers. But if prayer is entering into this encounter, into this conversation, into this spiritual, pure engagement with our Lord and raising our hearts and minds to him, then, we have to believe, I believe that when they sit there and they, it starts with, is there really a God in there? Like, you can't be serious. There's God in that gold box. And then at a certain point, right, it's going to be different moments for each of these souls. That question turns to, are you in that gold box? And that on that moment, it turns on a dime and it becomes a conversation. And they might be 18, they might be 8, they might be 80, and then in that moment, of course, they're going to have like all of this wild divine grace in their soul coming as a result of that question and coming in as a result of that conversation through prayer. But cooperating with that divine grace is not only going to be their own effort going into that conversation, but all those memories of mom and dad talking with me, or Mr. Moss talking with me, or whomever. And how did they answer? Of course, not that question of, are you in a gold box, but any type of response that they were given. That's going to be part of their prayer imagination. And so when we engage with our students, when we engage with our sons, whether it's on the ride home from school or whether it's, a really big moment that's caused some emotional upheaval in them, we are imaging forth God to them. And not to put like so much wild pressure on ourselves.
Yeah, no pressure.
But, we're going to be doing it in a crazily imperfect way all the time. But again, if we, just to bring ourselves back to how important this is, and how when we go on autopilot, we just don't do it. We don't do it well. And most of us men certainly don't do it well. And teachers, we get stuck in this again as we started. So just to know like the amazing benefits I think that this brings about in the human person. It's a crazy, sun, rain, fertilizer, air to all of the the seeds that we're trying to plant in our children, which in the end is their full becoming of who God made them to be.
Enough said. It's awesome. That's fantastic. And I like how even this conversation, oftentimes we can come to these things and ask ourselves, what are the bullets I should write down? What are the check boxes that I should, and there's some of that, some strategies, some tactics, and some things to bear in mind. But fundamentally, it is what you just described, which is so beautiful. And it's like this opportunity for us as persons to engage in freedom with these other beings becoming, these other little persons who achieve their personhood through conversation with other persons,
right.
Us as parents and God. And it's like, wow, that's incredible. And, some pointers and practical things can be really helpful. This conversation has been really helpful to me. But ultimately it's like, those are the means to the end. They're not the end. And the end is so beautiful. And so how great that you've finished there with the ultimate and final end. Well, beautiful. Mr. Gleason, Colin, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Rich. This has been great.
And thank you to all of you for listening as we talk today about listening. to support the work of Mr. Gleason and his faculty who do their all to form young men fully alive here and on campus in Potomac, Maryland, and beyond the walls of our school through this podcast and other means of outreach, do consider visiting heightsforum.org. Click on Give. Everything you do is incredibly, incredibly helpful. We really do appreciate it. While you're there, you can check out the most recent episode of the Heights Forum Faculty Podcast. The most recent episode, or the one that's about to be released, is on discipline. It's a great episode, so I hope you enjoy it. You can also learn more about the upcoming events here on campus, including the Conference for Teaching Men, which we will be probably hosting in late October, early November of 2025. So a lot to learn about there. And as always, looking forward to the next encounter, whether it's here on campus or the podcast or whatever else. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.